it's almost impossible um, to come in the right way through the current system. So we don't. It's not that we don't have a. It's not that our immigration system is broken. It's that it's a mess. It's not systematic. It's it's convoluted. It's ineffective and inefficient because it takes so long.
I'm Sienna Mayhew, and this is Real Unity, where we explore joy, pleasure, and relationships as not separate from resistance, but a part of it. Today, I'm joined by Lizzette Arias, who has been recognized with a 40 Under 40 award for her leadership and service towards the rights of immigrants. Together, in part 2 of our conversation, we discuss the righteous risks and joyous rewards of speaking out as an undocumented immigrant in America. Well, in part 1, we left off on discussing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness from your perspective as an undocumented immigrant and a dreamer. And I loved what you were saying about rest being your rebellion, your steadfastness, and just being joyful, allowing yourself to really experience life despite the updates in the news about birthright citizenship and the ice rage and just the chaos that we're facing, not just immigrants, but I think as a nation, we're really grappling with a lot morally. For you in like the microcosm of your world, of course, you and many of your allies call yourselves dreamers. What does that mean for you? And anyone who's not familiar with the term, could you just clarify that for a moment?
Yeah, so dreamers, the term comes from the Dream Act, which is legislation that would have provided a pathway to citizenship for undocumented youth. And DREAM stands for something, but we took that act name and started with this dreamers name because we have this common dream of to fulfill the American dream, right? And our parents came here with a dream to pursue the American dream. And so the dreamers name is very fitting for um, our community of immigrant youth. Um, for me, being a dreamer means being a immigrant that wants to achieve something greater than myself, achieve stability in this new country, and provide for my family and friends. And that could be provide emotional support, financial support, or just spreading joy and being part of the community. Um, I think we held on to the term dreamers because it also sounds a lot more hopeful than undocumented um, community, right? Because it gives you that sense that there is a dream to be fulfilled and to be pursued. And for us, when we were first organizing, it made us feel part of something bigger than ourselves. And that's really what kept us going, even when there was no hope for an immigration policy change. So that's why Dreamers is such a special name. I know it is not as popular now because, like I mentioned, DREAM acts. The A stands for alien, and now we realize that we don't like to call ourselves aliens because we are humans of Earth. And so that the Dreamers name has kind of gone out of style. But when I was, up and coming in the activism world, it was a good, empowering name
I've
for
always
me. And
found
that's
the label of alien to be so absurd. Actually, as you know, my mom is an immigrant, and when I was a kid, I think it was around the time she became a citizen, like to celebrate, we got these blow up alien dolls. I still have the green one. We had green, pink, and purple. And she really enjoyed playing with that label. Um, I agree. I think what you're getting at anyways, it's kind of dehumanizing and just it's old, it's old school. I think we should be done with it. And likewise, undocumented feels like a very flattened label, whereas dreamer feels spacious and it speaks to the American dream. Um, but also, I think people are starting to question whether the American dream is really attainable.
Yeah. And it seems it's less and less so, or it's harder and harder to reach the the standard American dream of having, like a house with a white picket fence and a dog and a yard and two kids and a car. Like these are very very standardized thoughts of what the American dream should be. But it's harder and harder to get those things because uh, people, whether you're undocumented or not, here in the US have less and less opportunities to pursue education at an affordable price, and they have less and less opportunities to have access to healthcare services at an affordable price. And so when these essentials are taken away, it's harder to, dream and pursue those things, whether it's the standard dream of material things that we have accepted as emblems of the American dream, or whether it's your own dream of like becoming a doctor, becoming paramedic, whatever your dream is. It's harder to pursue those things when you are worrying about, am I going to get sick next week? Do I have enough money to pay my bills? So overall, I do think the American dream is becoming very difficult to achieve and pursue, and it's very disheartening. But I do believe that people will figure out ways to continue to pursue it regardless. And I think that's what gives me hope for the future. And I do wish that it was not getting harder, that it was getting easier, but I think we'll have to make do with what we
You
have.
mentioned healthcare, or rather just the experience of getting sick and what do you do if you get sick? And I think a lot of Americans worry about that for various reasons. But what it reminds me of is the story you told in part one of our conversation, which is when you found out that you were undocumented, your dad had inhaled smoke from trying to save your parakeets in a house fire. And he was understandably too afraid to go to the hospital as he was encouraged to do. And while I think we all mostly have certain freedoms in this country, it's harder. I acknowledge it's harder for people such as yourself and for your family to navigate just getting the basics. Something that's really plagued me and that I gave some thought to before we started talking and preparing for this interview is why speak out when it might risk the safety of loved ones?
Yeah, I think I first shared my story after college. I had come to the area back home area and shared my story because I wanted to advocate for other undocumented students that wanted to go to college. Um, at that time, I felt that sharing my story would provide me more safety than not sharing it, because I was sharing it among a community that was supportive. And if anything were to happen to me or my family because I shared that story, I believed that my community would rise up and fight for me and my parents or whoever might be attacked or get caught up in the crosshairs. So that's what kind of made me not scared to share. Um, and now I am not afraid because I luckily do have citizenship. I believe that benefit and that privilege uh, is something I need to use to advocate for undocumented communities and immigrants. Because not everyone can share their story like me and not have ICE at their door tomorrow. Um, and this privilege is something I need to take advantage of. Um, and yeah, I find sharing my story empowering. Um, and it gives me kind of a safety because I know others will rise up for me if something were to happen.
I know you've been expressing how isolating it was to not share your story before you told a few of us select girls in college just before graduation. But now you seem very empowered, and your work in a very organized fashion is advocating for those who've been in your position, as you say, dreamers. And when you see what's happening on the world stage, you see these ICE raids, and you also see people more and more getting arrested at airports on airplanes. Do you feel like, do you feel like there's an increased risk in some people sharing their stories if they don't have your privilege of having citizenship, or do you feel like, well, all the more reason to elevate those stories?
Yeah, I think it is very risky to share your story now because it's it's a new level of enforcement that we had not seen before, and I don't know that I'd feel as like as safe sharing my story now if I had just graduated college now. I think there's new tactics being used to find undocumented people, including looking at social media feeds and videos and stories. And it's very scary. It is empowering nonetheless for someone to share their story. So from that perspective, I fully support it. But it has, I would say, it is riskier. Just because there's new ways to find people, and I don't I don't want to recommend it or not recommend it. I think everyone needs to choose for themselves. It is an empowering experience, and it does kind of, the truth does set you free. You feel lifted and relieved once you do, but there could be downsides to that. They could be big downsides. So I believe doing your research and figuring out what works for you is probably the best advice
And I
to.
think a point of research that's really relevant for people outside of being affected by these immigration issues is a flowchart that you shared with me on just that countless paths that people follow or find themselves on to get to citizenship. For example, when they seek asylum. And I know some people will say, well, um, I mean, we can't meet the needs of everyone, right? But again, if we didn't have that barrier, that desk, as you describe it, between those making the policies and the people affected, maybe they would look very different. We're putting the flow chart in the show notes again, but would you like to bring it up in your notes and share a few of those paths just to help people understand how complex the issue is?
Yeah, certainly. So being legal in the United States can mean a lot of things. For most Americans, it's being a US citizen, right? And for a foreigner to get U.S. citizenship, as you can see in the flow chart, if you follow that path all the way to the end, it could take several decades. And that's if everything goes right. It helps also to, for any of the ways you're trying to get into the US, it always helps to have money or to have a US citizen family member already legal in the US, right? So some of the other paths, like you mentioned, is asylum, which is a popular one that's being that is under attack right now, or being cut. And that one you are fleeing a dangerous situation in your home country, and you still have to prove all these things, right? And there's the burden of proof is so high that even if you are in a legitimate dangerous situation, you might not get asylum, and you might be kicked out back to that dangerous situation. Let's see. And if you follow the path of lawful permanent resident, which is the quote unquote green card, you basically have to marry into it, or by luck be the child of someone that already has a green card. So those are very limited pathways to coming in the right way, and they're very convoluted. Even the ones that are there, they're so convoluted and so restrictive that it's almost impossible to come in the right way through the current system. So we don't. It's not that we don't have it's not that our immigration system is broken. It's that it's a mess. It's not systematic. It's convoluted. It's ineffective and inefficient because it takes so long. I think when I first saw this flow chart, it really made me like feel overwhelmed with all the lines and the yes and the no's and the bifurcations, because imagine being like someone navigating that, and they're not, condensed little questions. It's forms, pages long forms that you are filling out and figuring out if you qualify for that or not, and like figuring it all out. And it's awful to know that this is how we are treating people that want to be part of our community and our nation.
I really would encourage everyone to look at that flow chart, and there's so much there that, even we can't get into right now. But another thing that I think is on people's minds is what to do when an undocumented immigrant commits a crime. And I can rationalize the statement being exerted a lot these days that, well, if you didn't come here legally, then that's already a crime. So then if you commit another crime, you're out. Um, when you see cases of criminality amongst undocumented immigrants, how have you been reacting to some of those? Do you have some more nuanced perspectives?
Yeah, so the first nuance I would mention is that being in the country undocumented is not actually a crime um, per legal terms. Um, of course, this sentiment is shared by immigrant communities as well. I've heard many undocumented people say, well, they shouldn't have been driving if they're here undocumented. What were they thinking? Like, they deserve to get booted out, right? And this is a sentiment that is shared, I think, across all people that are witnessing this national debate on immigration. Um, Personally, I believe there are tiers to crimes. Um, and that matters, right? Like there's felonies, there's misdemeanors, and the crime needs to fit the punishment. So if you are driving without a license, does that fit you being taken away from your family and leaving your kids behind, um, or taking uh, your kids with you and robbing them of growing up in the US with access to a great education system? I would say not. But then if the crime is like more severe, such as a felony murder, probably there is um more reason to get you out. We should not be uh forming policies on the worst case, like the fear of the worst cases being, or the worst crimes being committed, um or those scenarios happening. We should be forming policies around the people that are here. The majority are not committing crimes, violent crimes. They are committing maybe just traffic crimes, misdemeanors, infractions. And I think we need to nuance how we say, oh, they're criminals, or that's a crime, they need to get out, because not all crimes are the same, or as awful or affecting as many people as severely as
Yeah,
others,
the
right?
traffic violations reference made me think of jaywalking. Like, imagine getting deported for jaywalking.
Yes. Yeah. Like that would not be, I don't think that is in line with our values as a nation. But it is the policy, right? Like if they catch you jaywalking and they say, "Oh, where's your ID? You don't have one." Oh, well then why not? And then it escalates. So, um, I think really figuring out and understanding that there are different types of crimes and severity of them. That's where the devil's in the detail,
Right,
right?
and you mentioned certain things not being crimes, in fact, which I think makes an elegant segue into Define American's mission. It was a resource that you shared with me, using storytelling amongst other styles to counter misinformation and misconceptions. Why do you think Define American is such a good resource for that?
Yeah, so I will share when I met the founder of Define American, I had just started becoming active and sharing my story. And he had this idea that we needed to voice our stories and give them a face and be out there, because that would put a face behind the number, the face behind the evil, that unnamed evil that immigrant and undocumented immigrants are, according to um, certain people, right? And sharing our story, and they really help people that want to share the story figure out how to share it in a responsible way, and also in a way that's empowering to the person that's sharing their story, and do it so that it can convince others and can sway people to understanding what the immigrant experience is. And this not dissuade, and kind of erase some of those misconceptions people have about undocumented immigrants. And they have so many resources. They also have a podcast that everyone should check out, where advocates and other immigrants share their story and share their advocacy work and experience, that is inspiring, and it just gives you more examples of what undocumented immigrants really are. Um, and I've just really enjoyed following them and using their resources.
They
I
had a
recommend it.
section called is it Move Them or Lose Them? Yeah, it's clever. And what I like about that is it helps people connect emotionally rather than politically. And I like that actually throughout part one and now part two of our conversation. We rarely put political labels on this issue, but one of my favorite stories of yours is that, otherwise leaning couple that helped you financially go to college, which is where we met. And these interesting points of unity, I think, are really telling on or into how complex this issue is. What other points of unity are you seeing as a result of Define American or just generally as a result of storytelling?
Well, I think through storytelling, we are able to connect with each other. I mean, it's a an art form. It's the way we've been connecting with other humans for as long as humanity has been around. You can relate to someone because when they say, I did this and I experienced this, because you can put yourself in their shoes and understand what they were experiencing. And that just changes the the whole narrative. It puts a face behind whatever the topic is, and it puts feelings, and it puts a person that you can interact with and feel for and connect with. And that you might not get that from looking at statistics about how many undocumented people there are in your state, or how many are in the nation, and how hard it's going to be to get rid of them. And so the story is really what connects us. And even though, like, I know that when I've shared my story, people that have no relationship to any immigrant ever can relate to it, because they in their lives have experienced struggle and obstacles that are bigger than they can on their own meet. And that's a common theme among immigrant stories. And when you share, like, oh, I had to figure out how to go to college with no money, like that's a theme, a recurring theme in our society, and people can relate to that. And people have people that have um no interest in giving to immigrant communities, or immigrant college funds. They understand, oh, these students have it like I did when I was coming up from a rural area and couldn't afford college, or couldn't even imagine going to school in the East Coast. So it's a way that we connect and can form bridges, because there are like different versions of the stories. The themes are the same. It's us pursuing happiness and finding joy and wanting to be there for our community and families. And I think those values are always going to resonate with one another. And that's how we can probably move forward on all these issues facing
I think
our
another point
country.
of unity, which isn't necessarily always unifying, and interestingly, is the desire to maintain one's culture. And there's this concept going around of, well, if we, especially in Europe, I think, especially in European countries, that if we keep allowing immigrants in, we're going to lose our culture. There's some, I think it might be the Netherlands. There's some country where the number of immigrants really just outnumbers the number of natives who still live there. What are your thoughts on that, of like the tension of preserving culture, but also allowing immigration, the value of immigration, but also like the risks involved culturally?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's super interesting to discuss culture. Um, I have two cultures. I'm Latina and I'm also American, right? And so I think you can have both. I know you can personally. Um, our culture is always shifting and changing. Young people come up and they like different music, and that changes the what's playing at the club, right? Like it's always gonna be, culture isn't something that's static. It's always gonna be changing. Um, whether it's from young people coming up with new things or it's immigrants. So holding on to culture too tightly, it's never going to work. Even if we wanted to, it's just not feasible. And I don't believe it has any culture has stayed the same since the beginning, unless like maybe some very secluded societies, but it's always changing. And I think that's what makes it beautiful and enjoyable, that culture can change fast. Change scares people, and I understand that. But it's not something we can prevent. I don't believe we can prevent it. I think it would add to it, add nuance, add different tastes, add beauty to it. And I think embracing the the changes would be better than resisting them. Um, what won't change in a culture, I believe, are the values that hold the society together, and or won't change as fast. So holding on to values, I agree, is more sacred and important for a society than holding on to culture norms, and because those are always going to change. But your values, you shouldn't won't change them as easily.
I love that. Really well said. How sacred values can be, and values in this country, I think sometimes like they are rooted, in how we live life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, freedom. In the modern day, I think multiculturalism is becoming a value, and that's a little bit more controversial. Uh, but we also have to acknowledge that this is stolen land. That is a flattened way of putting it, I think. I know there are other ways of articulating essentially that this land was originally owned by indigenous people. And for whatever reason, I think people tend to resist facing that, and acknowledging that quote unquote we, or descendants of some of us, we actually brought a new culture here. And I think I think perhaps cultures are not always compatible, and it doesn't always look so pretty on the surface.
Yeah, yeah. I value that. We are kind of a unique uh, world where we are able to compare our past because we are far enough removed, with where we are now. And it's important to, I guess, acknowledge our differences, but not let them uh, rule how we interact, or like be ruled by the fact that we are different. Um, and yeah, I just culturally, it's it's always going to be different. Like even between states, there are differences. Um, and I think storytelling and sharing examples of what drives you and what values you have is really what can bring people together in those situations. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough to.
Well, and freedom of speech is such an ingrained value in this country, and I think by extension, storytelling is an ingrained value, which is very much rooted in your work as a dreamer and sharing your story today and in part one. And I know you've said to me that you've never asked to be saved; you only wanted to be seen. And emphasizing that immigrants are more than just their struggle. They create, they feel joy, they're hard workers often. What else do you want people to know that perhaps is not fully seen about an immigrant's experience?
Yeah, I mean, immigrants are like everyone else in that they have multiple dimensions to their person. A lot of my friends are very immigrant friends are very artistic, and they either do music or they do art, and they express themselves in those beautiful ways. And um it's not always about, oh, I have to share my story of struggle and like it was bad, darkness, um struggle, and they also have a brighter side, and they can express themselves through art and music and poetry, and it's beautiful, right? And um it's beautiful to see that despite this shared experience we have, there are differences among us, and that we are each you know living about our lives as best we can as humans. And despite all these attacks on our community, we are able to continue to live like that, like our true selves. I love that some of my friends are able to write lyrics and poetry that represents the immigrant experience so thoughtfully and beautifully, um, and they are able to share those with the world. I can't do that, but it's beautiful to see. I, on the other hand, can write about my story, and I can organize spreadsheets about whatever fundraising or organizing we need to do, and that's my talent, my way to express my commitment to the cause. Um, so yeah, I think just remembering that immigrants are full people with different gifts to offer the world is super important in understanding us.
And unfortunately, bringing it back to the reality of where the law stands or might stand in the near future. Um, where does birthright citizenship stand as of July 16th, now that we're recording, and considering immigrants as full human beings with lots to offer and often a really distinct way of artistically contributing and expressing themselves? What do you think might be lost in how lost, yeah, more existentially in some of these policies as they may be shifting?
Yeah, I am scared to see that executive order removing or taking away birthright citizenship is out, and it's been implemented or signed into law. um right now it is blocked, and babies born in the US can get are have that right to have citizenship. It's awful to know that we have to say this in 2025, like, hey, they didn't take citizenship away yet. um it's really awful. It's something I never thought I would see coming. Um, I believe that if it were to be implemented, meaning a baby born in the US would not have automatic citizenship, it could create a class of stateless babies that have limited rights in the world, not just the US. And that is so dangerous for our humanity, for our nation, for those people, those little babies and their parents and their future kids. And it's so dangerous that I don't even want to think about it. I fully am praying, hoping, and working toward um, getting something to continue the block or to get it repealed or whatever we have to do to get it done so that birthright citizenship can continue forever, because it is what our law has been and it has worked fine. Um, so yes, that's what I'm hopeful that, in a few more cycles, we won't be talking about birthright citizenship. Like it'll be off the table and everything will go back to how it was, and we can continue fixing the other problems we have, not create new
Absolutely, I
ones.
hope so as well. As we're approaching this new era um, in immigration and really grappling with it as a nation and looking to one another as individuals for our own individual humanity rather than as numbers. People who are looking to maybe get involved or in small ways support your causes, where can they find you? And would you recommend any certain channels that they could contribute to?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm always interested in hearing from people that support or want to support undocumented communities. Excuse me. Um, One very great resource is Define American, like we mentioned. I would also, if you are in the state of Virginia, Dream Project is an organization I helped established that helps undocumented immigrants go to college and gives them scholarships. So check that out. I also would love to hear from you, and you can reach me at through email, lizzetta@gmail.com. It's just my name with an A at the end. And or find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect. Um, I really hope everyone that wants to get involved does. It's truly tough work, but it is rewarding, and it's gonna change someone's life for sure.
I really admire you, Lizette. And as your friend, I just want to say the joy and the drive you bring to this world and this country is very much valued and needed. Thank you for coming on the mic with me today. This was really a gift, and I'm hopeful that everyone that's listening will perhaps have some, maybe shifts in their mindset or just feel momentum and being behind you in this cause.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thanks
Take
for having me.